Very good afternoon to the Sportsfan radio panel and very special guest today, and prescient, as the judge would say, that we've got Brett Phillips on the program because Australia are through to the Davis Cup final, Brett.
G'day, Mark and crew. Yeah, it's a great performance, isn't it? Considering that if you go back to the quarterfinal on Wednesday against the Czech Republic, they were on the ropes. Australia, Jordan Thompson was defeated, and then Alex Demonor was, 3-5 down in the second set, and his opponent, Yuri Lehichka, who made an Australian Open quarter, he was playing lights-out tennis. I was actually going for a walk and I'd actually turned the TV off. I thought he was done, Alex, and I'll never do that again because he's phenomenal how he can just play the moment. And he's got all those Hewitt traits. We've talked about that a lot. And then he wins the third set tiebreaker. And then obviously we're in good hands with the doubles with Purcell and Ebden. And we beat the Finns, who were the surprise packet, getting through to the semis. And here we are in the final. So, yeah, runner-up last year, obviously, to the Canadians, who surprisingly got knocked out by Finland at the quarterfinal stage on the opening day for the final eight in Malaga this week. And, yeah, obviously Italy beating Serbia overnight. Yannick Sinner, what a star. He's just had an incredible year to beat Djokovic in best of three. Yeah, sets it up for a tantalising final. And, look, Australia, absolutely a chance. So we've won the Davis Cup a lot, but we haven't won it in quite some time. So, gee, it'll be a great back end of the year. And just this amazing camaraderie that the Australian team has. You look at the whole bench there, they're up every single point. The players who are not playing, all the support staff, we know how much it means to Leighton and Alex and everyone else who comes into that team. So whilst the Davis Cup is not what it used to be, Australia, there's no shortage of passion to win this prestigious team competition.
Brett, just on the Davis Cup, just on the Davis Cup generally, because I'd written it off a couple of years ago. I think a Spanish footballer took over the Davis Cup, and I was one who was saying, this thing's got a short shelf life. It's gone to 3 sets rather than 5 sets. The timing of it was all changed, and look, I'd written off, but you'd say that's just not the case. That was a premature calling of its death.
Oh, look, it's been a big talking point for us on the first serve this year. I have a pretty good connection with Mark Woodford. Mark does a lot of commentary with us at the Australian Open. We go back and forth all year chatting about a range of things, and one of the hats that Mark wears is on the ITF board, and, the Davis Cup is one of his key portfolios. I know after the group stage when Australia played in Manchester, the crowds were really, really poor for that, to be totally frank. And Mark and I went back and forth, and, I just said these neutral venues, I mean, I can handle sort of best of 5 back to best of 3, even though I think we'd love it to be the pinnacle like the Slams. But we accept that, nothing stays the same forever. But the neutral venues was the worry for me. But watching the action in Malaga this week, the crowds have been terrific. Now, obviously, Finland had a lot of support on the opening couple of days. The Czech Republic, not so far for their fans to travel. There's a pocket of Aussies, but the locals have come along. It does feel more like a Davis Cup sort of venue. But long-term, look, it's obviously being discussed by the whole of tennis at the moment. And I'm talking about all the governing bodies. What are we doing with this competition? Because we've got the United Cup that might be on its last legs in Australia come January. Let's wait and see. Hopman Cup came back this year. We've got the Laver Cup. And I've felt that the Davis Cup has been pushed right down in the bottom rung, if you like. So, but the presentation in Spain has been terrific this week, but we'll see what comes of it. I mean, I just can't quite get my head around that if you win the Davis Cup, you don't get the opportunity to do it on home soil unless you're obviously Spain. Now, Australia, yes, and as Mark has said to me, Australia can bid to host the Davis Cup final 8. It's probably never going to happen because we've got a Grand Slam not far around the corner, and that's the focus of Tennis Australia. But, yeah, I'd still love to see the home and away ties personally right throughout the year. But maybe this will grow on us in time. And as Mark did say to me, we need to give it some more time to see if it can have that World Cup of tennis sort of feel.
The fact that Djokovic is playing in the Davis Cup is probably a positive as well, Brett. And on the topic of Djokovic, when was the last time he actually lost a match having match points? I can't remember. Like Sinner, who we've talked about previously as one of the next batch of rising stars, won a match where he had match points against him, and the actual match points he played were phenomenal. So I think, because previously it was always Davis Cup, there was no buy-in from your top players around the world. So Federer would play sometimes, but not every year. Where I think if you're an Australian, you banked on the fact that Davis Cup meant so much, the history of it, representing your country, and a really strong connection. And whether we get back to that, who knows? But I think Australia's doing their forthright or their best to actually say, right, we're going to buy into the Davis Cup. We've got, and I was doing the exercise this morning, we've got 8 men in the top 100 at the moment, which is, and I don't think anyone would be able to name them. In fact, if I said our highest ranked player is 12 in the world.
Yeah.
Like men's tennis at the moment, it's good, but it's probably underwhelming a little bit, if that makes sense.
And Coutta, of those 8, I don't think Djokovic is included, because I think his rankings have actually gone out of. I'm not sure he's even ranked anymore.
Who's that? Sorry,
Djokovic, Kyrgios.
Kyrgios is in the top 100.
I don't think he's even got a rating at this stage, Brett.
No, I think he's lost his ranking, and we're hearing on the weekend that he's unlikely to take any part in the Australian summer. So I have no idea where the future lies for Nick. I didn't hear the commentary of the Tennis Channel at the ATP finals, but I read plenty on social media, and not surprised. He's actually got a pretty high IQ. I think we know that. He knows the sport. Apparently, he was a commentating success. So he might be starting to think about that now, because I think the body, and you know, that probably goes back to having not probably done the work. It's caught up with him, his body. You know, whether it's the knee, other areas, the game's getting even more demanding than it ever has. He would look at that top end and go Alcaraz, Sinner, Holger Rune, all these guys who are trying to, go up against a man who's 15, 16 years older than them, and he's still playing at this phenomenal level, Djokovic. I mean, it's just brutal tennis, and there's no shortcuts. Maybe Nick's coming to the realisation that I can't quite cut it. I mean, he's got no shortage of things to do in tennis, but yeah, you talk about the men. I mean, the men have had a terrific year, and this will be fascinating for Leighton up against Italy tonight, because he went with Jordan Thompson, and he's been very loyal to Tomo over a long time. In that first rubber, didn't get it done, so he throws Alexei Popyrin in, who was pretty nervous. He'd never won a live rubber before, Alexei. He played in a couple of dead rubbers, so that was huge for him to step up. Does he stick with Alexei? I think, you want to probably keep Purcell and Ebden for the doubles, but Max can come in and play lights out singles. What a year he's had, from outside the top 200 to be inside the top 50. So, yeah, spoiled for choice. And then you think of the Davis Cup team in the future. I mean, eventually, a guy like Rinky Hijikata will probably work his way in. He's played great team tennis, won an Aussie Open with Kubler this year, and he's played in college tennis. He loves that whole team feel. So we've got depth, we've got talent, we've got buy-in and passion, and we'll see if it carries us over the line. But it's funny, because the narrative I'm interested by the narrative that TA tend to go with, we've got 8 men inside the top 100. But then I was looking at Alex de Minaur. He was the lone wolf so far ahead of the field. So I'm wrapped at Purcell, Popyrin, Vukic got inside the top 50 at one stage. Tomo's not too far away from his highest ranking. I want to see more of them push into the top 50 now and really get where Alex is. That's what I'd love to see next year.
The interesting part, Brett, I suppose, is the bottom 4 in that top group. So you look at names like you mentioned, Vukic, Chris O'Connell, Rinky Hijikata, and then obviously Kokkinakis is at 65, who's probably the best known out of that group. A lot of wins and a lot of work is done, and I think Destiny has talked about, and I think it might have been on your show. It may have been about
one of our podcasts.
One of your podcasts about her struggles around living, being a professional tennis player, the demands financially, physically. These guys have earned the right to be in the top 100. I think that's the important part about all this, because they've played challengers, satellites, German club tennis, probably shared rooms with 5, 10 people, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And now, like, Chris O'Connell's going to be a great story, and hopefully he gets to win a couple of rounds to stay at the Australian Open, which then means he sets himself up for the next 12 months.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, if we think, Johnny Millman, who's going to retire at the end of the Aussie summer, who I think would write the best book, and he maximised his best tennis between the age of 28 and 32. So, Thompson's, I think, is in that 29, 30. O'Connell's a bit older, 28. So the Aussies sometimes do take a little longer. I mean, there's the freaks, like De Minaur obviously was a great junior, made a rapid rise so quickly. But others, it's really incremental. And, I mean, guys are playing longer now. The prize money, I think, will continue to get better. I mean, this PTPA that's trying to look after the players. Tennis has never really had a union as such. We had them on the show earlier this year. They're making some noise, and Djokovic has led the charge on that. The ATP announced this year that a baseline model for the top 250 players. So if they don't reach a certain wage, the ATP will top that up, whether it's through injury or whatever. So they're trying to say to the top 250, you can make a decent living out of the game. And then beyond that, obviously all the talk around Saudi Arabia and their interest in tennis and how far tennis gets into bed with them. What does that look like financially? Does that filter down to the 300th ranked player, 400th, so that everyone can get above the breadline and breathe a little bit? I mean, I'm fascinated by that whole tier, all the way down as to the reasons for playing. And it does vary. Everyone's got a very different story. Some are doing it as an investment into their life in tennis. They might be going to coaching or whatever the case. But, yeah, it's a reward. If you can get inside the top 100, it's a real reward, and you can be a little bit more comfortable. You can go, I can breathe a bit here. I can earn some money. I can invest some of that money back in to bring a coach on the road more weeks, bring a physio or a conditioning person so I can keep the body durable so I don't miss weeks. So that's the place,
Brett,
you want to get to.
You mentioned coaching, and we talk about coaching a lot on this show. It seems Australia's clearly got two of the better coaches getting around, Leighton Hewitt and Darren Cahill. I just wonder where you see that the coaching of our players sitting at the moment, whether they're getting, Coutta mentioned, the 8 top players, but are they getting sufficient coaching?
Well, this is interesting, isn't it? Because if we go with Alex de Minaur, he's had an interesting year. Now, Adolfo Gutierrez, his Spanish coach, has been with him since he was 7. Adolfo said this year, I only want to do 25 weeks. I've got a family, it's demanding. So Peter Luchak came into the fold, but then Luch was dispensed of post-Wimbledon, and then Matty Reid's just come in and they all love Matty Reid, right? He's the he's the one that they look after. Leighton loves him. They play doubles with him when he was playing to get him some prize money at the Aussie Open. But I wouldn't call him a coach. I mean, he's been more a confidant, hitting partner, someone who can be in the camp and prepare you. All the others, Max Purcell, a guy like Cole Smith, who is a coach out of Queensland, very low profile, but him and Max strike a great chord. Could have mentioned the name Kokonakis before. He's the most fascinating for me. Now, his coach is Todd Langman. He's been with him forever. If there's one player out of that batch who I feel like now needs an outside voice or an additional coach, because a lot of the players are going with 2 coaches. You do X amount of weeks, I do X amount of weeks. We all communicate as a team, wherever Thanasi is, but I just feel like he needs another voice. Like a lot of players have brought in, Holger Rune brings in Boris Becker, although Holger can probably afford Boris. Not sure if Thanasi can afford Boris Becker, but I'm sort of trying to get to there's just someone else who can add a different dynamic, because Thanasi, he should be up, really. For the talent he's got, he should be where Popper and Purcell and Vukic are, and for a variety of reasons, he just is not there. His love of the game has been questioned at times, Thanasi, and you're either in this game or you're not. If you're half in, you sort of get the half result. So he could just sit in the 60s, the 50s forever, but really he should be a top 40 player at least. So
at a minimum, Brett.
I think we've got good coaches, but I think our guys have got to always look to add a voice, even if it's the consultant.
Brett, we've talked about the men. we've got to talk about the women. If we've got 8 men in the top 100, the women's side of it, we've got none in the top 100. Our highest ranked player is 110, and that's Kim Birrell. And obviously, Isla Tomljanovic is injured at the moment, who's probably our best player by obviously some margin. You then have names like Astra Sharma, Olivia Gadika, Arena Rodionova, Storm Hunter I'll talk about, and then Destiny at 186. Now, there's not a massive group of players that you could see being top 20, top 30 out of that list. Top 50 stretch maybe. That's got to be an issue for Australia, doesn't it? Australian tennis, and a real concern that we don't have the rising stars. And then if you drill down further into the juniors, we've got 3 in the top 100. We've got a girl who's 15 ranked 11 in the world. And then we've got 29 and 96. Now, where is the next Ash Barty?
Yep.
The next Sam Stoser? Those girls that have obviously done an amazing job for Australian tennis, put us on the map, Grand Slam winners, but also great people. We talk, and then the other side of this, of course, is that we've got an Australian Tennis Australia CEO, who is also the tournament director. There's got to be some KPIs or some criticism of him, doesn't there, surely, in this?
Oh, you want me to go down the Craig?
No, we've covered. No, mate, we've covered him before, and I'll just. It still blows my mind that he's had no accountability around the COVID side of things, and yet here we are, 3 years on or 4 years on, coming up, and he's still talked about as being one of the great CEOs. And anyway, back to the women.
Yeah, we digress. We could talk about Tylee for a bit, but look. Look, it's much leaner pickings. I just will mention 3 names for the future, and you've got them on your list, Coutta, but Taylor Preston, I think, is going to be a star. Now, she's playing in Brisbane today in the 60K final up there. Got a great coach, Brad Dyer. They work together over in Perth. She's part of the National Tennis Academy, but she's based remotely. But I interviewed her on the show this year, and sometimes you can just see the glint in the eye of someone, and she's got some real capabilities. Now, she's inside the top 300. Emerson Jones is only, 15?
15.
Younger brother, Hayden. They're based out of the Gold Coast, but Emerson's
41.
a young star.
He's 41 in the world.
Yeah, and they come from a great family, real sporting genes in that family. And the other one is Talia Gibson, who won the doubles in Brisbane yesterday with Priscilla Hom, but she's 18. So Perth are producing a couple of good ones. So we've got asterisks next to them. They're the future. No guarantees. Yeah, Kim, snuck in at one stage inside the top 100 this year, just out. But this gets back to as well, and I'm adamant about this, that I just would not give wildcards to home. I'm talking about the 4 majors who have this luxury of being able to give wildcards for each of the slams. For the tour events, I can handle it. So if we've got Brisbane, Adelaide, okay, let's give it Aussies maybe a couple of chances as wildcards. But we're effectively giving wildcards into a major to the same group of Australian women for up to 10 years now, who just can't qualify on their own merits, not being inside the top 100. So they get a nice little cash injection to start the year, and that's the benefit of playing for a Grand Slam nation. But I'm a huge believer you earn your spot on merit. You look at that group, Astra Sharma, capable, Jamie Foulis, capable, Destiny Iava, very capable. Kim Birrell, very, very capable. They're all decent players, just can't get past that hurdle right now. The competition's tough. It's a big tennis world out there. They go and play in all corners. You've got to generate your own atmosphere a lot of the time. They're playing in front of 2 cats and a dog. It's not easy out on the road, but I don't know where the light is, Coutta, on that one. I can't see a rapid rise for any of these players. I think there's the jury's out maybe that there's a window still possible as they get into their mid to late 20s and they mature a bit more. The ruler I've put through probably 3 or 4. That the horse is probably bolted from them ever getting inside the top 100.
And then, Brett, obviously the good part or the really positive side, is one of the great tennis names. It was Storm Sanders, but
Yes.
got married, and her name is now Storm Hunter. But she is currently the number one ranked player in the world, and obviously Elise Mertens, her partner's number 2.
Yep.
Now, that is an amazing effort for Storm,
Brilliant.
who is a late blossomer or a late developer.
Yep.
But really, she won't get the recognition she probably deserves for that.
No, that's because we're always putting doubles. This is what I love about the ATP finals a couple of weeks ago. They actually played the doubles. It's like thinking, the old days of going to the footy. You go there, watch the 2s into the 1s, and it's in Turin at the moment. I went to the O2 in London. They get 10,000 in for the doubles, and then it would build up to 17,000 by the time the singles were played. And these guys felt important. They felt, gee, there's some real eyes, watching us here. Anyway, that's not a story with doubles, but for Storm. Yeah, it's great. Look, she's had to overcome, obviously, illness, some injury, long time off the tour. This is the conundrum she's been in, though, because she would love to flourish in singles. And on her day, I mean, she's been our best performed player the last 3 years for the Billie Jean King Cup, the best singles record at Storm. And you look at her lefty, the dynamics of a lefty in terms of their serve, ground stroke, she's got all the capabilities. She's tried to play singles and doubles where you can this year. The planets don't always align there. And then she's gone, gee, I'm doing okay in doubles. The paychecks are pretty good. I can really set myself up here. And then she rises to world number 1. And her singles ranking, I think she got as high as, was it 119? At one stage, I think she got to a high of. More than capable, but now she's done so well in doubles, that's going to really set her up for the future. So it's a shame that, we may never see the best of her in singles, I think.
And then the flip side for her as well is that by being strong at doubles means that you get the mixed doubles at the majors.
Yeah.
And again, there's another really good paycheck for that. You talk about the O2, and obviously I think you interviewed someone on the way there on a ferry a few years ago. So very different. John, you'd be impressed by the O2. All the players have their own locker rooms and they're treated like stars, and recognised because they're the top 10 or whatever it is, or they're qualified for it, recognised as the best in the world and treated accordingly, which is something foreign, I think, for a sport that probably deserves it.
But can I just following from that, and the Craig Tyler issue, if you like, but it was about 10 years ago, I think, there was a survey came out that tennis was Australia's most popular sport. And as Professor said, well, look at the commissioning of, who commissioned the survey was Tennis Australia. But I don't think they'll even pretend to put that survey out now. I think pickleball might be actually more in the public's mind than tennis at the moment. I just get the feeling that unless it's something like a Davis Cup final, which wakes us up, or the Australian Open comes around, most of the year we're just not hearing about it. We're not interested.
Well, yeah, yes, obviously, I live and breathe it, and we follow tennis every week. We have a radio show that goes 44 weeks of the year, and so I'm in it. But I understand the casual viewer, and I'm lucky. I do some stuff for Channel 9, at least, that we get to see the majors on free-to-air television, which is a great deal. But obviously, you guys would be aware, Foxtel, going back a few months ago, cut beIN Sports. So if you're a Foxtel subscriber, you had beIN there for free. You could watch all the tour events week to week. Now that's not even available unless you go and actually subscribe to beIN or Tennis TV or WTA TV. So there's not as much, apart from the majors, and obviously Channel 9 are showing the Davis Cup and the Billie Jean King Cup. There's not a lot of tennis in our eyes week to week. I'm talking about all the Masters events and all the great tennis that's been played at 500 and 250 level. So not as much exposure, but yeah, there's so many aspects to the development of tennis, in this country. I think I said it on your show before that, and I'm still of the view that I think if it ever, I don't think it'll ever probably happen. But really, you'd split tennis in two. You just have the Australian Open, which is the pillar, run by an executive management team and board, and then you'd have, tennis, the community tennis, run by a separate general manager, CEO, along with the states. Yeah, I mean, I still hear about the same issues about not feeling enough love. I mean, if you're a governing body in any sport, you're not going to please anyone. The AFL cop it, Cricket Australia cop it, everyone. You know, I sort of think maybe we're a little harsh sometimes, but I think some of the criticism is warranted. And you know, for example, you know, like we have an Australian Pro Tour here, but it's not promoted, it's not marketed, and you know, these are good players. You know, and they go to Darwin, they go to Cairns, they go to Traralgon, they go to Burnie. They're in Brisbane this week, and there's no one really coming along to watch because we've got the Grand Slam and that's it. And we don't worry about it. We're providing playing opportunities, but we're not telling anyone about these players and getting any sort of footage or.
But the guy who's running the Grand Slam is also the guy running Australian tennis at some level. And it just seems to me that we're just so focused on that fortnight. That's actually unhealthy. Just as a sideline, I was at Wangaratta watching the tennis as I do on the weekends, and it's now the Wangaratta Tennis, Croquet and Pickleball Club. Now that's just horrible to me. Well, so diluted.
Yeah, pickleball's the interesting one. We do a paddle podcast, which is the other sport, and obviously there's a facility in Melbourne down at Docklands there underneath the Baldy Bridge, and there's other paddle centres that have been set up. Now, paddle is huge in South America and Europe. Pickleball, obviously, huge in the States. And I just read across the weekend that Steve Wood, the former Australian Open, former Tennis Australian CEO, is now getting right involved with the development of pickleball here. Tennis Australia are now the governing body for paddle because they were separate. So they've taken that under their wing. And, so I suppose it's all about the whole package, isn't it? They want to get more people into tennis, but they realise that society times are different, time management's different. People don't necessarily want to play regulation tennis. Okay, so we'll throw you paddle, pickleball, cardio tennis, all these offerings. You pick and choose, but how clubs are going to set themselves up long term will be interesting. I mean, it's quite easy. Paddle is different because paddle has the much more costly in terms of infrastructure at your tennis club. Pickleball, you just put some lines in and that's a fairly straightforward operation. So I think you're going to find a lot of tennis clubs are going to be multi-use across all of those going forward because.
Well, it's funny. Pickleball's a form of tennis and is played in the basketball court.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about crossing over your sports. Yeah.
I was just going to chime in. Afternoon, gents. Matthew Perry, rest in peace. He was playing pickleball just before his death. But is that just if you could explain it quickly? Is that like the 2020 equivalent of for cricket? Is it a quicker game than tennis, or is it a smaller court? Isn't it?
Yes. So paddle and pickleball are pretty much the same. The only thing with paddle is you've got the glass windows behind where you can use that window so the ball can bounce off into play and then you can it's continuous play. Pickle's just, for me, I haven't played pickleball, but I have played paddle. Pickleball just feels like a little bit of table tennis out there. Much smaller court, depth touch, but the rackets are very, very similar. It seems like maybe more of the older generation are playing pickle. Paddle is a combination of like tennis and squash together. So it's a fair workout. When we played down at the Docklands, you sweat it up a fair bit and you're changing direction, ball's going behind you, in front of you. Similar in terms of I think scoring and all that sort of stuff.
But I heard that Jack Sock is playing pickleball professionally. So there must be some money in the game in America.
Huge. I can't think of the exact figure, but the other day I was reading there's these pickleball leagues are offering huge prize money. They get crowds along, so it's taken off. Absolutely.
Well, wait till Saudi Arabians get involved. Anyway, sorry.
Brett, you mentioned before the National Tennis Academy. Now, not many people would actually know we've got a National Tennis Academy and who's behind it. And then there was a job advertisement, I think it was in the last fortnight, maybe 3 weeks. And I think it was for the high performance director for Tennis Australia. Now, what is the National Tennis Academy?
Yep.
Where's it based? Who is it? And then how are they reportable to Tennis Australia? Again, I think what we're doing here is we're just all these levels and layers that are within the sport. Yeah.
So the NTA is based out of Brisbane at the Queensland Tennis Centre there. I actually went and visited last year for a couple of days. I was really curious to have a look. Spoke to a lot of the players, a lot of the team there. There was a guy called Chris Marty heading it up, but he's gone to the States now. I think Brent Larkham's involved. So basically the NTA is, okay, we're going to support there's criteria to get in where, I think it was 23 players this year. So that can range from, it's usually kids in that sort of 15 to 23 age bracket who are coming into the performance side. And obviously they'll look after you to about 23. Then they say, well, you're on your own now. You've got to start fending for yourself. So you obviously receive some funding. You receive coaching. You can use that Queensland Tennis Centre as much as you like. They do. This is what was explained to me at the time, because the players are in and out of Australia. They'll have blocks of the year where they actually train there, and there was a full-on gym and everything you need. But for example, I mentioned Taylor Preston before, the young 18-year-old is based out of Perth. So she's actually part of the NTA, receives the funding and support, but has elected not to base herself there. Obviously, it doesn't make sense. Perth, Brisbane, the logistics. She's got a great setup in Perth, well coached. Yeah, I mean, look, obviously there's a lot of academies around the world. I think obviously it's good in some ways, but the biggest part now that I think is better in tennis is that the private coach has stayed involved in the entire journey. Once upon a time, it was TA taking the best kids. Thank you, private coach. You've got them off to a start. We'll now look after it, but they've recognised that the private coach has got that connection. It's not, you're not the finished product at 13, 14, 15, whatever the case may be. So is it perfect? No. I could talk for hours on it, to be totally honest. Player development is the biggest topic of discussion in this country. Our best practice compared to the way Europe prepare players, compared to the way the Americans play. I will just say one thing that I may have said last year, but it's been reinforced this year for me, that the college pathway, though, I think is an absolute no-brainer. I realise every kid might not want to do that, and you don't have to do a full 4-year term. You can go and sample it. Rinky did 2 years. That's enough for me. And he was building. He can get out on the road. It does so much for you, because to enter tennis as a 17, 18-year-old, unless you've got extremely wealthy parents or you're getting funded, it's enter at your own risk. And going to college, at least you get a bit of maturity, you get a lot of matches, you get everything paid for, you come out. Adam Walton, great story this year. Came out as a 23-year-old from Tennessee, ready to go, built the body, built the mind. He's resilient, and he's, his rankings now inside the top 200. That's just one example.
Brett, we were talking to our American correspondent, Dan Butterley, about this very topic recently, and basically the American Olympic team is full of college athletes.
Yep.
It's just about all of them. We've got an entirely different system, and I couldn't agree more with you. It just makes so much sense to get some education and get really good sport, an environment that absolutely encourages you with the best coaches around. It almost seems a no-brainer to go that way.
Yeah, I probably should just say, it does. I agree. It does feel like a no-brainer to me. But and what some people have explained to me this year is that kids wouldn't even have it, and parents who need to be really educated, right? Because the parents aren't sure. They don't know the best passage and path. They're relying on people in the tennis fraternity to really guide them. But a lot of kids didn't even have it as a consideration. So now it has to be a real serious consideration. Because a lot would just go, hey, I'm going on my own. Let's go. Let's get out there and play. Let's play pro tournaments. But unless you're an absolute superstar, it's a hard road. It really is.
And Brett, I think the point you've raised there is that in year 10 or 11 is that you need to have that on your horizon so that you do everything you can to meet the college criteria. So playing tournaments, rankings, whatever it is, so that you actually are able to go to college in America. That, I obviously know quite a few that have done it. The benefit for them is if they don't make it as a tennis player. They come back with a career. Come back with a qualification.
Yeah.
And a pretty good experience that they've got to fall back on. So I agree with you. I think it's no-brainer. We've certainly talked about before. And what it also does, I think this is the important part as well, is that it makes for better tennis here. So you've just finished commentating the Victorian Premier League, and the standard of that has gone up considerably.
Good.
And there's a lot more younger players playing state grade. And I won't talk about mixed doubles in the Waverley district. That's gone by the wayside. They don't give a shit. But Premier League has come on leaps and bounds.
Can I just say, I saw a bloke last week. We did the coverage of Kooyong. It was fantastic. Right. So I actually interviewed him earlier in the year. He'd been to college. He's a Kiwi. And he'd come to Melbourne to get more opportunity. Lands himself at Grace Park, not far from me here in Hawthorn. Beautiful club. But I'd never seen him play live. So he played state grade, went and played just a little small amount of ITFs. His ranking's about 1,010, right? His name's James Watt. Now, he's a big boy. I don't know. He must be around 200 centimetres. It was like watching John Isner last week, just serving absolute thunderbolts. But his lateral movement, great mover on the ground as well. So I'm fascinated to see, right? So he's 23, gone to college, come from New Zealand, where we know that, tennis isn't absolutely flourishing. It's hard yards over there. Comes to Melbourne, wants to get into a better environment, play more tennis. What I saw was a top 100 player. I'm not trying to, make this sound better than what it was. This guy was phenomenal. So, and we interviewed him after, and I said, well, you're hoping to play a full year next year? Yes, absolutely. I've just been trying to put some cash behind me and set everything up so I can travel and maximise the year, and just keep an eye on this kid, James Watt, ranking just outside 1,000, what he might be able to do in 2024. But yeah, it's great.
Isn't he someone then, not saying necessarily, but isn't he someone you'd say, well, maybe he's worth a wild card? Like, just rather than the same people every year, or the winner of the AO Challenge or whatever they call that now, is to actually have some talent identification. Say, well, do you know what? Like, this guy is someone that's up and coming, not the traditional pathway, or he goes through the, I don't know, but these are the sorts of people that we should, because if he loses first round, he gets 100,000.
Well, the last time I can think of, Dave, was Lee Tu, right, who was coming back for part 2 of his career from Adelaide, was a junior, started out, didn't do a lot, lost interest in travelling, so goes back to Adelaide, sets up his own coaching business. Everyone kept telling him, Lee, have a second crack at this. Come on, you can play. And he decided to do that right when COVID happened. That's when they were playing all the UTRs in Australia. He was dominating. He got into the Australian Open based on his success with the UTRs. He hadn't even played any ITF events. That was the last time I can think of Tennis Australia going outside the, I suppose, normal criteria, because what had happened is there were a lot of players ranked above him, clearly. He didn't ever rank. But they were thinking, well, hang on, we've given it to him 7 times, we've given it to him 3 times, 4 times, and they haven't done anything with this wild card. And that's why I don't like the wild cards, to be totally frank. Look, I think certainly he's the guy. Anyway, I'm going to keep an eye on him, because I think he'll make some noise in 2024.
All right, Brett. Look, thanks for your time today. We might get out of you a couple of predictions. Who's going to be successful out of Australia and Italy in the Davis Cup?
We've got to stop the Yannick Sinner. Well, he's an adopted Aussie, Darren Cale. What a star! If he could take a 4th athlete to world number 1 in tennis, where does that put him? Phenomenal. Well, obviously Popperin. I think Popperin will get the nod, so he's got to stand up. He has got to stand up. If Alex can't beat Yannick Sinner, which is going to be tough, then it's all on the doubles and the other reverse. So I think the Aussies, they're hurting from last year. They want to win this thing. So, Leighton will have him pumped running through the banner tonight.
All right, and on Sportsfan Radio, we love a long-range prediction. Your Australian Open winners in the male and female singles.
Well, I think they're going to build a statue of him, aren't they? There's the talk about building a statue of Novak. He might win 15 of these. He might eclipse what Rafa's done at the French in one slam. Oh, yeah, I mean, right now, you can't go past him. I mean, the fascinating one's going to be Alcaraz. Hasn't had a great time of it post-Wimbledon, but he's learned a lot about himself. It's not dire straits. He's number 2 in the world. He's, finding out how to deal with his body and everything. And we get to see him in Australia, which is great because he missed last summer. But, yeah, how can I go past Novak? And on the women's side, it's been a fascinating year, Mark, because Arina Sabalenka grabbed the mantle there for a little bit. Iga's got it back at the end of the year. And those two, along with Rybakina, are the big three. Jessica Pegula, she's part of the top 4, but can't beat any of these players when it really counts in the majors. So I might go Sabalenka to go back-to-back. But, yeah, I can't see a bolter somewhere at the moment. Although we're getting a few. Hey, Osaka's going to be back. Kerber's going to be back, both from giving birth. Wozniacki. So it's going to be a good Australian Open.
Just on that, I'll take you back to the men's side quickly if I can. Can the man of the moment, Sinner, become a saint?
He's a star. Oh, I love him. I love this kid. I'll tell you what I'm going to be fascinated by is him and Alcaraz jockeying for position around Djokovic. I reckon Sinner's grown a leg, and the type of tennis he's playing at the moment with Darren in his corner, he could certainly get through to a Grand Slam final for the first time. So, yeah, going to be a huge year for Yannick. We're pretty blessed when you got Sinner, Alcaraz, Runa, the year of Ben Shelton. What a year, this star young American who's brash and bold. There's more coming as well. Men's tennis is in good hands for a long time.
And there's an extra day of the Open this year, Brett. Starts on the Sunday.
I know. What's going on there, Mark? We work hard enough for 14 days. Now we're going to go into a 15th.
Innovation, Brett. Innovation.
No, it makes a bit of sense. It makes a bit of sense, doesn't it? And, I mean, it's not going to avoid, if everyone thinks that we're not going to have a couple of late night finishes. I mean, tennis, as we know, the day starts at a certain time, but there's no end time until the match is totally over. But I think spreading the first round over the first 3 days, hopefully will keep everything on track. And having just the 2 matches on Rod Laver and Margaret Court means that third match of the day, where they often used to put Rafa in, who would push the night session back to staying at 8:30, 9 o'clock, and that pushes the whole schedule out. At least we'll always be able to start the night sessions on time. So we'll see how it pans out. But, yeah, going to be a huge Australian summer. Brisbane back on the calendar, which is great for them. The United Cup, jury's out for me, but I'm interested to look at it. Truncated version down to 2 venues, Adelaide, Hobart, and into the Aussie. So we'd love the window to be longer, but that's what we've got, the month of January, and we'll see how it rolls out.
Okay, Brett, thanks for spending time with us today, and we can't let you go without you giving a plug for your show, which we all listen to.
The First Serve, yes, their final one for the year, Mark, tomorrow night, big 3-hour extravaganza, 8 till 11 p.m. So, yeah, on SEN in Melbourne, on the SEN app. You can listen online, sen.com.au, or if you're listening around the country to this great show, SEN's got a frequency everywhere, including over in New Zealand, well, for this year anyway, because Hutchie's done a nice little deal with SENZ for next year. But, we look forward to it. 15th year of doing the show. We're going to go into a 16th year of doing the show next year. So, no, it's good fun.
Well, that's terrific, and we look forward to listening to it, especially around Australian Open time.
Indeed.
Thanks, Brett.
We'll be there. Thank you, gents.
CBP.
All right, gentlemen. The AFL calendar and scheduling. I just wanted to mention this before we get off the footy. AFLW finals in the same week as the AFL draft. The draft seems to have sucked all the air out of the news cycle, and I couldn't find anything about the AFLW or very much in the press this week. Your thoughts, gentlemen?
Why are we giving it time if they're not? I shouldn't be like that. Like, seriously. As I said before, I don't think they care. If you watched the final last night at Springfield, not the Simpsons Springfield, but Springfield in Brisbane, it was a 4-point result to Brisbane beating Geelong. Brisbane have been so successful, Professor. They've won premierships. They've played in grand finals. They're probably building a dynasty, and they've got a terrific ground. Maybe that's why it wasn't promoted, because it wasn't in Victoria. And then obviously the game today that's being played at North Melbourne's home ground at Optus, Icon, Princess. I'm sure it's had other names along the way, against Adelaide. Would you know it's even on in Victoria?
I had to look for it, Coutta. It's on at 3:05 this afternoon. My question is this, gentlemen. The AFL preliminary finals, there's one played on Friday night and there's one played on Saturday night. Why are the AFLW relegated to Sunday afternoon when it should be on a Friday night?
Professor, it's the scorpion and the frog. The AFL can't help its own character. It always does this. We must be getting sick of talking about this. The AFL doesn't care about the AFLW. It makes them look good. They think it does. I think it makes them look appalling, actually, because I think since situations like this, it shows their true character. They'll if there's anything shinier, they'll go with something shinier, and they always put AFLW not second. I don't know, 8th, 10th. I don't know. They can't help themselves.
Well, Professor, you raised the point about the draft this week. The first round was done on Monday night. Now, the first round, you might think was 18 picks. No, I'm here to correct that. It was 29 picks because of father-sons, priority draft picks, concessions, something else in there, whatever else. And then night 2 or day 2 is then the remainder of the draft, and that's done on Tuesday night. And then the rookie list draft, which if I went and straw polled 100 people about what a rookie list would be, they would all get it wrong, because it's technically anyone can go on a rookie list. Jake Melksham, who's 36 or something, whatever age Jake is currently on the rookie list. Chad Wingard. So again, the AFL does some things right, and then they do some things so poorly that this week they've missed the AFLW. Like, is it on there? Isn't it on them to help grow the game? Like, the clubs do their best. Like, the club's social media and everything that they do, the games that they play, the access to players. So, like, everything that they do, they're trying to promote the absolute hell out of the game. And they've got this handbrake on called the AFL, who at every turn is sort of, well, we've got the AFL draft this week, and then we've got the rookie draft. We've got the preseason starting for clubs, so we're going to give that publicity. I think it's embarrassing.
And Coutta, can I just say it's also embarrassing? It gets to the end of the draft, and Mr. 64 or whatever they are, he's pumped up as if he's the next big thing, or he's going to be enormous. There's 130,000 boys who are age 17 in Australia. Of that, you're going to get 64 pretty good footballers. In any year, you're going to get 64 kids who are pretty good. But for God's sake, they're 17-year-old kids. We know that most of them won't have much of a career. Those who do have a career will probably play about 45 games. We pump it up to a ridiculous degree. And on the other side, we've got this magnificent product, the AFLW, who are still struggling to get some oxygen, not just from the media, from their own bloody league, the AFL. And I think somebody at AFL House ought to have a bit more of a look at their priorities.
I love the draft. I think the draft's great. I think seeing kids get selected, and also the best part is their families getting some recognition as well because of the work they've put in. But when you've got someone like a Kevin Sheehan referring to him as Dusty Martin-like, or he's got the skills of Zach Merritt, or whatever it is, like, that's just crap.
And they're 17.
So, but again, getting back to the AFLW, Mark, last night as I said, Geelong last season struggled. The week before, or 2 weeks ago, my predictions were, I'll use the French term shithouse. Melbourne got thumped by North Melbourne, and Geelong absolutely destroyed Essendon. So I think I tipped both those games pretty clearly, Melbourne and Essendon to win, but they didn't. I think Sydney has been a really good story for the year. Obviously recruited a couple of players in McAvoy and Chloe Malloy from Collingwood. That's helped their other players that were already in the system and that develop. And then Geelong as well, obviously, with their players coming through this year. A great story. And lost no credit. Lost no fans last night. One point, there was one free kick paid in the second half night, I believe. One free kick, and it was with 3 seconds to go in the game.
Yeah. Well, at least we're talking about AFLW, even if the AFL aren't. Now, I think Paul set a record for quietness, so we better get him into the program. Paul, NRL, the Dolphins are targeting the Broncos' Ezra Mam, who scored 3 tries in the grand final. So he's one of the hottest prospects going around. He's off contract at the end of the end of 2024. There's figures like $3 million being thrown around that he might be worth. What are the Broncos going to have to do to try and keep him?
Well, I think what they have to do is free up some space, and that may come in the form of Kurt Capewell, who looks like he's going to be going to the Warriors, and that'll free up a fair bit of money there. Their priority is Reece Walsh and Ezra Mam, who we saw almost delivered a grand final to the Broncos, but they were beaten, of course, by the Panthers 3 in a row, who were desperately struggling to hold on to Jerome Luai. There's talk that he's already signed in principle with the Tigers for well over $1 million under Benji Marshall has driven a large part of that. So the money seemed to be too much for Luai, and you can't really blame him with a young family. This is a deal worth pushing $1.5 million a year, as against $850,000 a year from the Panthers. So we have a strange system in the NRL where he'll still have to play next year for the Panthers, despite going to the Tigers the year after. That's just the system that we have. It's a strange system, but there's absolutely no chance per Brandy Greg Alexander, the boss of the Panthers, that he'll be released early. But stranger things have happened.
Paul, one of the things or reasons that, the money's one part of it, but he's also expressed an opinion to play halfback. And at the Panthers, he obviously will never do that, while you've probably got the best number 7 in the world at the moment.
Yeah, well, it's a double-edged sword looking at that. He's on Instagram. He's certainly, one thing he'll never be accused of is being humble or shy, but he's posting songs about pay me what I'm worth and all this stuff, which is normally his agent's job. He has had the benefit of playing under, as you say, the best halfback of our generation, which has made him a better player. He's taken that to be of the view, I don't want to be in his shadow anymore. I'm worth a lot more money. I want to be the man. Now, if he wants to be the man and he can prove it at the Tigers, well, I'm happy to be proven wrong. But he's going from a 3-time premiership winner to a club that's very recently been a basket case. If he can resurrect the basket case, we're talking something like getting the Suns in the AFL to the grand final here, or GWS from their lowest point to the grand final. So if he wants to be the man and be paid like the man, let's see if he can be the man. Sounded like a country and western song.
And obviously the Dolphins, I think Mark still mentioned Emre Man, but they surprised a few this year, including yourself with your pre-season predictions. Season 2, I suspect, Paul, will be harder for them to back up.
Will be, and I don't think, unlike Luai, I don't think Ezra Mam, you'd be crazy to leave the Broncos. The Panthers dynasty can't last forever. What the Broncos have on their side is a younger playing roster, and they won't be losing the players each year that the Panthers have. I think the Broncos will be the dominant team towards the end of this decade, so starting next year. So I do not think Ezra Mam will leave when you've got players of the calibre there of Reece Walsh at the back you've got Payne Haas, you've got one of the better teams on paper, but also you've got a city behind you and a great coach who's proving his worth. So I'd be very surprised if he hopped across to the Dolphins. Sorry.
Yeah. So and Paul, there's talk of Kurt Capewell getting an early release to the Warriors because of salary cap tightness. Obviously, Kurt Capewell came from Penrith, been a driving force at the Broncos during that sort of initial period. Great state of origin player as well. He'd be a big loss, or do you think they've got the ability to cover it?
They've got a lot of depth coming through, and it's one of my favourite phrases, a footballer's footballer. He really is the type, like I know we're connected with Luke Lewis, that type of player, Wade Graham, who just puts in, and other footballers love him. But they have the talent coming through. But most importantly for the Broncos, they need that 800,000 a year to top up what they're planning to offer Reece Walsh and Ezra Mam to keep them from your Wayne Bennett types. So I don't think he's doing it as a sacrifice, but he hasn't been offered a deal anywhere near sort of the Luai type money, or even I don't think he's got any job security given the juniors and they need the money elsewhere. It's just a cruel fact of rugby league. He's given it his all, but it's a business.
Question without notice for you, Paul, and you'd probably have to go back through the records books to try and find an answer, but who was the last NRL captain who was told by his club not to attend training, apart from the latest one, the Bulldogs captain, Raymond Fatala-Mariner?
Well, I just wonder if it was that one at Phil Gould. He's now had about 4 secret coffee meetings, and he blows up when people expose it. Maybe don't have it in a public cafe, Gus. Do the doors not shut there at Bulldogs headquarters? I mean, if you want to meet someone, do it behind literally closed doors. Don't do it at a public cafe. People have what's called smartphones these days, Gus. So he seems to be this fake indignation that he's spotted with all these players. But I think that Mariner's being moved on. I can't remember that scenario. But then again, of course, Adam Reynolds wasn't treated too much better by the Rabbitohs after winning a premiership, and I thought he would be fated forever at the Rabbitohs. So I think there is some recent form when a club turns on a player, whether he's captain or not.
Well, it's going to be a difficult time for the Bulldogs because he's got 2 years left on his contract. So I would have thought that the discussion should now be, well, where would you like to play next?
Yes, and that's he'll need to find somewhere. They're trying to free up money to get Adam Fanua-Blake, who could be the best forward in the game or one of, and that was one of Gus's. That was at the Sydney airport, I think that was. So very private location in a cafe there, because there's not many people walking past that venue. Gus, that was another meeting that he had recently. So they're trying to free up money to sign players of that caliber, which I don't blame them for doing.
Well, just we spoke very briefly about the AFL draft. You don't have a draft.
No.
Not today, but perhaps between now and the next season, I wouldn't mind having a good discussion with you about why you don't. It doesn't seem to be holding NRL back at all. And B, is there going to be one in terms of what's been suggested?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to it, but just briefly there's no magic as to why the Panthers have won the last 3. They've got a nursery of about 2 or 3 million people.
I agree.
The very kids that GWS was trying to target to get into AFL. But I did read about it once. One of the reasons is that they're just physically not ready to play the game at the age that the AFL draft is. You've got AFL, whoever goes top 10 would be ready to start now. There wouldn't be many 17 or 18-year-old ready to play rugby league. There's a few freaks like Reece Walsh, that type. But in terms of the bigger positions, they're just not physically ready. So they come through the grades, but there isn't any system. If you can snap up a kid at 10, there's no limit on how many of those you can have. So a lot of these players have already come through certain schools with certain affiliations with certain teams, and they're snapped up very early on, probably like the soccer style as well. But you're right. I don't think there'll be a draft, but that would certainly even things up, because you look at Melbourne, there's a big celebration when one player who's from Melbourne makes an NRL team. Whereas the Panthers, I think, had 7 or 8 out of their 13 who came through their junior ranks. So there's your answer in terms of where the clubs get their talent from. It's the backyard. if they've got it.
And it's a great point you raise. And then they've got feeder clubs that they then have.
Yep.
So Melbourne have got a couple of feeder clubs
Yeah.
out of Queensland. And now I think one of the big changes for the Melbourne Storm, Paul, is the relationship with North Sydney.
Yeah.
That's a massive win for the Melbourne Storm. Now, what that looks like in years to come, if North Sydney apply for a license again, so be it. But I think that for a Storm perspective is huge.
It is. It's a beautiful ground, though. I used to go every year to watch South and North, so it's a really good ground. But I've got to get in very quickly. The big news is Michael F-Bomb Maguire. He dropped more F-bombs in one documentary than Billy Connolly in his whole career. He's off to coach New South Wales, and he wanted to do both roles. He thought he had enough F-bombs to go around between coaching New Zealand and the New South Wales Blues. A few wise figures at New Zealand headquarters said no. And do you know why that reason is? Because you wouldn't want him coaching New South Wales players to play for Australia and then beat New Zealand. That would look quite egg on face, wouldn't it, if that happens? So that's the reason why they've stepped in and said, if you want the New South Wales job, even though you've done a great job with New Zealand and beaten Australia 30-0, no, bro.
Which one do you think he'll take, Paul?
Oh, he's already gone from the Kiwis. That's done and
He's
dusted.
gone.
So he will be coaching New South Wales, but he's a bit surprised and a bit perturbed. There might have been a few F-bombs thrown around when he was told he can't do both. Whether he can take on Rain Man Billy Slater is another question. I don't know whether F-bombs would take down Rain Man, so we'll see what happens.
All right, gentlemen. Well, time's beaten us today. I'm just going to go out on Gelding's tips. So races at Kilmore and Swan Hill today. He likes at Kilmore, race 5, horse 4, Simeon. Race 6, horse 2, Le Ferrari. And in the Kilmore Cup, he likes horse number 1, King Magnus. And at Swan Hill, race 1, horse 12, Clan de Oro. And race 3, horse 4, Palentine's Day, not Palestine's Day. So
Autocorrect, I believe.
I don't know if that would have many supporters at Caulfield headquarters. Sorry, keep me moving on there. So, yeah.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks very much for your participation today. It was great to have Brett Phillips on the program as always. And I'll look forward to talking with you in a fortnight. It'll be the last Sports Fan Radio for the year.